Good evening, Democrats.
Good evening. Howdy.
Is that the best you got? How many Democrats are in the House? Well, welcome everybody. What a great turnout. I know you're not here to hear me talk, so. You don't mind? All right. So let's get started with the pledge. If everybody will stand. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, take your seats, please.
Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to the Texas one and every day.
So I hear a little birdie told me a rumor. We have a birthday girl in the house. I heard Lane turned 16 yesterday. Is that true? I think it would be most appropriate if we sang happy birthday. All right, we gotta get it on tape. It didn't happen if it wasn't video. All right, here we go. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Laney. Happy birthday to you. Thank you for spending your birthday with us.
She didn't have a choice.
Hi folks, it's wonderful to see everybody in the house tonight. It's a great turnout. Do we have any guests that haven't been with us for a long time? Just raise your hands. Welcome. Do we have any new members that just recently signed up like in the last couple months? All right, guys. When Anna gets here later, you got to sign up and you be a new member next month. Uh-oh, technical difficulty.
Bring in the tape.
Scotch.
And maybe you could use some refried beans, that's like taco
You're not eating it right there.
I mostly wanted meat. It tastes like good food. And it's surprisingly saltier than expected.
Oh, it is?
Give us just a minute, we'll get a little bit more tape. So while we're waiting, did everybody sign in first? All right, awesome. Did everybody get a raffle ticket? No. Oh, no. Bill's going to come around with the raffle tickets. We're going to have a drawing at the end of the evening. To give you an idea, who was here last month? All right. The raffle giveaway tonight is a copy of Inclusive Transportation, which we heard about last month.
That was a good book.
All right, so let's move on. I know we have a few candidates and candidate representatives. I want to start off with the 2023 candidates, and then we'll give you a minute each, and then if there's any 24 candidates, you guys will get 30 seconds. So who's here representing or a 2023 candidate? Nobody?
When they get, the other guys get a minute.
Yes, they will. Okay, 2024 candidates or our 2024 representative. Come on up.
well, thank you very much, guys. I'm Peter Fuller. I'm running, we're standing right here in U.S. House Congressional District 2. So it's a big effort. Thank you guys for all your support. So I just want to be a watchdog, like a watchdog against the Democrats and of course the Republicans up in the House. Want to be that voice of reason, bringing the appropriations back home to like the gaps where we need it most. Like let's find out where we need those monies appropriated, and I'm going to make sure that happens for us, for the people, not just concrete and culverts. So that's one initiative that I have to really focus back on the community. Where are our weakest links, and then let's strengthen those up, because we're tired of living in a community where we're constantly asking ourselves, like, how does this keep happening? These things on the news. So I believe that's something so small, a small fix for $48 million. We're not getting our $48 million worth. Just look on the street, that's an inanimate object that doesn't require any really care, but people that need the most help, that's what I'm going to be focused on. So I'm Peter Fuller. So if you want someone like clean up our streets, like just dial 1-800-NOT-A-BUMS, and we'll be out there to clean up this place, get it going. So again, thank you so much. I'm Peter Fuller. I'll be here if you need me, Peter Fuller.
And we will have one more candidate representative later. Sadly, they went to the other Los Cucos, and so they're on their way over.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I'm here to represent Karthik Sora and District 15 for Texas Senate in 2024. He is a great energy, very, very good developer in energy, along with a HISD award-winning teacher. And he is he's a great guy. And he'll be sponsoring you all, be able to hear him in person a couple months down the road. Thank you.
Any other candidates? So I'm going to turn the floor over to Mr. Chuck Cruz. He has an announcement and some really good information for us.
Howdy, everybody, Democrats. My name is Chuck Cruz. In 2022, if y'all don't know, I ran for Texas House District 128 against Briscoe Kane, one of the worst pieces of you-know-what in all of Texas. I obviously didn't win, but it is important to run against every seat, every time when it's held by Republicans, and that's what I'm here to talk about, because unfortunately, if y'all don't know, 127 did not have a Democratic challenger in 2022. That means Cunningham walked into office completely unopposed. This must never, ever happen again. This map is something I put together. The green dots are held by our awesome Democratic incumbents, and we very much appreciate the hard work that they're doing, fighting outnumbered in Austin. But we've got the yellow dots, which were the seats which were challenged by Democrats, and then the red dots, no Democratic challenger at all. This must never, ever, ever happen again. And I'd like to talk to y'all at length a little bit more about this later, but they have changed the way that the data is reported on the election results, and we are now less able to see what the field looks like, less able to get a handle on where our opportunities are, and they've done this on purpose because they're in control. They're basically throwing up a smoke screen to make sure that they can maintain their position. They're fighting as hard as they can, and we've got to fight back. I am absolutely happy to help somebody run for office. I know it was a pain in the butt to be learning a lot. My first time myself, I want to make sure that never happens again, so I'm happy to help candidates. I've worked with Mr. Fuller to try to guide a little bit on here are some of the things that you need to work on, and I want to make sure that we're doing that across Harris County. We are Harris County. There are 150 seats in the Texas House. We got 24 of them right here in Harris County. If we can get these other 9 to be ours, we get that much closer to parity, and then we can push for a blue Texas. That's what we all want, I hope.
Yep.
All right. We need to find somebody. I'm happy to help. Please reach out to me. John's got all my contact info. I was signed in, so please. We got to get somebody for 127. Got to. Thanks, y'all.
Thank you for running last time. You ran a heck of a race.
Absolutely.
How House districts are every 2 years. Every major election, every single one of them is on the ballot. I'm sure Representative Shaw can talk to you a little bit more about that. Thank you for the opportunity.
Chuck, would
Good
you,
job, Chuck.
part of what you're presenting.
2024.
Could you point out the fact that Harris County is at a minimum 25% of the state's votes?
So 150, 24 out of 150 were basically 15, 16%. Sorry, I'm
Correct.
1 in 6. So 16% of Texas right here in Harris County.
That are represented, but the vote count, I'm talking about there are more votes that count for 25%.
So what-
We've
so
got
what we're-
power to flip Texas.
So what we're looking at in Harris County, and this is what Mike Doyle's working on, our Harris County Democratic Party chair. We had about 800,000, I think.
830.
Thank you. In 20. If we get to 1.1, that turns the blue dots, or turns the other dots blue.
1.1 million.
1.1 in Harris County. Harris County alone has enough to make it happen.
Correct.
And part of what happened in, let's use 23, 22, we had about 200,000 known Democratic votes from 20 that didn't vote in 22.
Yep.
We know where they're at. They're typically what we looked at as part of what Clubs in Action was doing. This is part of the report. We found where the lack of turnout was. And it typically fell in places where we didn't have a club footprint. Because remember with the Clubs in Action, and this club was very instrumental in the success of Clubs in Action. We're going to talk a little more bit later. With the Get Out the Vote, the door knocks that came out of this club and the community engagement, but all across Harris County, it was instrumental in the vote. We did turn out, but we weren't able to get that other 200,000, but we know where they are now. So that's the target for 24. If we get 1.1, makes her job a lot easier. Absolutely. Any questions for Chuck? Because it's really important. Awesome. Thank you, Chuck.
Thank you.
All right. Any other candidates? So we're going to have, like I said, one of the representatives for another candidate here after Penny talks. All right. So we'll move on to the reason you all are here. You have to put up with my bad reading. State Representative Penny Morales Shaw is an attorney in Houston. Yay! Where she represents the 148th district. Where's 148 then? Right here. So you can see, she came a long way to come and visit with us tonight, and I thank you for that. Which includes parts of Northwest Houston. Representative Shaw is currently serving her 3rd year at the state capitol, and during her first legislative session, she was awarded Freshman of the Year. She's a member of the IT Caucus, the LGBTQ Caucus, Mexican American Legislative Caucus, the Texas Ports Caucus, the Women's Health Caucus, and she was a founding member of the Climate Caucus.
Yeah, you need more to do.
She's a native Houstonian,
She's hot.
attended Houston Public Schools, has lived in Northwest Houston for the past 13 years. She's raised 4 successful children as a widowed mother while managing her multi-state law practice. I am just so happy. I want you to join me in welcoming Representative Penny Shaw.
Before I get into the constitutional amendments, which is why I was invited to speak, I want to just say that y'all are awesome. And I haven't been up here in a long time because, as you can see, my district's, this is the loop, and my district starts just above the 610 loop, and this is 290. This is most of it right here. So it's quite far away, and I live right in the corner of my district. Because after redistricting, I had all of this and all of this, and I got 68% new district this last turn. So it was really like a new district, but in a lot of this was Republican area before, so the numbers are real different. But I looked at it and I said, there's no fixing that map. When redistricting came out, because sometimes you lose a little corner or a little section like this, but literally I lost my voting microcosm of the Heights and all of the north side.
Wow.
Right, yeah, it was huge. And then I got all this these pieces of other people's districts. But I thought, hey, those are people who never got to vote for a Democrat before because they didn't have a Democratic candidate. So I was like, we'll make the best of it, and it's worked out. Yeah, it's been good. It's been really good. It makes me feel really good that you all are proud of the work I'm doing, because it's a lot of you in this room, I would say a majority of you, that block walked, that drove me around while I jumped out of cars into businesses handing out my literature, and all of you are still here, and that just speaks to how amazing and dedicated you all are. So thank you so much, and it was just a thrill to be invited back up here to speak to y'all about the amendments. And we can talk about the legislative session and some other things after I talk about the constitutional amendments, but there are 14, so there's a lot. And I did print, actually had my staff print out a stack of them just in case, because I'm not going to cover it in gross detail. I'm just going to touch on them so you have an idea of each one. And then I also brought these booklets to give you if you're interested, the Texas Constitution. And I have plenty of those so everyone can take one home. And then these are the copies of, actually this newsletter is going into the mail, but it'll only be in District 148. But if anybody wants one of these, make sure Carolyn gets one. Yes. We'll actually be mailing those out from the state capitol next week, but they'll only go to District 148 because that's how the House does it. But we're going to ask for an extra 1,000 copies. So if any of you want an official copy of this, because the print is super tiny, because my staff is in their 20s and they think everybody sees like they do. Exactly, but we don't. And so I have to tell them next time to make it like 14 font or something. But if you want an official copy of my newsletter, just give me a call. My number's on there, and we're happy to send you one in the mail. Out of district, it's no problem. So I'm going to get started on the constitutional amendments because I know we're going to have some other people speaking tonight. And okay, this is tiny for me to read too, so I'm going to do my best. And if I say that there is no opposition to the amendment, it means that you should vote for it, if you agree with it. Because there was no opposition, meaning that on either side of the aisle, everybody agreed that this was a good constitutional amendment. If I don't say that, it means there were pros and cons, and they're listed on here, and you can look at them and weigh them and make a decision if you think that's a good investment or a change in our Constitution. I also want to say, I want to put one thing in context. Because there's a majority-minority situation in the House right now, some of these constitutional amendments, you'll see if you look at the cons on there, that the Texas Legislature has policy that they address every session, if it comes up as a bill, or if it was a bill before, whether we want to repeal it, amend it, change it. When you make a change to the Texas Constitution, it's very permanent because it's very hard to change back. And so because we have a GOP state legislature, they are using that right now to change things in the Constitution so that if the makeup of the legislature ever does change, it's been Republican-led for 20 years, these things are kind of made permanent. So when I'm reading about the constitutional amendment, pay attention to the topic and then think about what I just said about this is something that could be addressed by the legislature normally, but they're asking for it to be more permanent in the Constitution. So you can think about that and think about all the changes we're going through and how there's legislation to constantly thwart local control these days. We see a lot of that, and you'll see how some of these will resonate along those lines. Okay, so here we go. Prop 1. Prop 1 is really like the right to farm. And what that means is, have you noticed driving in your neighborhood in an mostly urbanized area now, where you'll see somebody has this huge yard and they'll have bales of hay? Have you ever noticed that? Yes. Or they'll have some cows, or they'll have some horses, and you're kind of not out in the country, you're kind of in the city. So that became a problem for a lot of people that said, I don't want to see bales of hay in my neighborhood. I want to see, condos and houses and schools and businesses. And so this amendment is to give people a right to have all the farming equipment and farms and bales of hay and cows and all of that in any part of the city or state that they want to have it. Because there were starting to be city ordinances, if your grass was 4 feet high, for example, in a field, that was a problem, like a nuisance. So that's what that's all about. That's a real personal constitutional amendment. The next one, which had no opposition, gives tax exemptions to businesses for facilitating childcare. So that's a good one. I don't think I have to get too much into that. There was no opposition to it. That's Prop 2.
Could you read that? It doesn't sound.
I wish I could read it. Let's see. I can read it. The constitutional amendment authorizing a local option exemption from ad valorem taxation by a county or municipality of all or part of the appraised value of real property to operate a child care facility. That was really hard to read because it's super tiny. But that's...
Have you seen the child care facility that's right up the road here? It looks like a Lifetime Fitness.
I have not.
Well,
No.
you should go around that way. The ones up by me, up on past the Cedar Road,
Mhm.
they look like Lifetime Fitness.
They're huge.
They're huge and they're expensive.
Are those part of a business or are they independent child care businesses? Because it's different.
It doesn't really read that way.
The way it, and when you read the pros and cons, it's supposed to be a business incentive. Do you disagree with that, Bill?
No, if you're saying that, I don't know, the local chemical company should have an on-site child care center, I'm all for that.
That was the idea.
But that's not what it sounds
Now,
like.
in the application or interpretation, I hear what you're saying. It could be used more broadly. And maybe the definition isn't narrow enough to say this was the intent and this is what it should be used for.
I'm just saying, the standalone child care centers are huge, big businesses.
Right,
And
and
they're
that,
charged through the nose.
and that wasn't the idea, but I hear what you're saying. So things are not always worded properly either, and sometimes the application is different than the intent.
You can bet if it passes, they'll be in line the very next day, and they'll for their package.
I got you. Well, we'll look a little closer at that one. Prop 3 is against wealth tax, so the difference between assets and liabilities, and Texas wants to say, we don't want any tax on the wealth. Yeah, so you know what that's about. Prop 4, which is a big one that was in the news a lot, was the homestead exemption. Do you remember that, raising it from 40 to 100?
Yes.
Okay, so the problem that a lot of us had with that bill, it's made it, but was that 40% of Texans are renters. And we tried to put amendments on so that they'd have some of the pass-through benefits from a tax benefit, and that did not work. So that's a problem that we had with that one, but obviously it's a huge benefit to homeowners. There's other parts of that same proposition. It's not only about the homeowners. There's a benefit for business or commercial property, so that over a 3-year period, their appraisal ceiling is capped at 20%. Let's see, I think there's one more. Yes, schools are limited in their taxation. That's how a lot of taxes get their revenue. Taxation to the elderly and disabled. It is limited on where that limit is applied, and that's a good thing, because schools do rely on property taxes to pay for their general revenue fund expenses. So it covers more than one thing. Yes?
Do you think that prop in effect is going to lower the money that's available to the school?
Yes. Yes, it will. And we're going back to session in October to address school funding. There's about $5 billion that has been set aside. Normally that would have been addressed during regular session. It always is. Law enforcement, education, healthcare are the top ticket items generally every session. But because the governor wants statewide vouchers, they are sort of holding that aside and trying to make deals and figure out how they can pass vouchers. Yes?
You believe it's pure coincidence that the special session is called after schools have resumed?
No, I don't think there's any coincidences in Texas at the legislature. No. Yeah. So, yes, I got you. So Prop 5 is about the PUF fund, the state universities, and it's a huge, huge increase, and there was no opposition to that one either. So the beauty is that it includes the University of Houston, and that is not normally the way it goes. So we're happy about that. University of Houston is growing tremendously. There's often, every session, there's a lot of argument about HBCUs not getting enough funding, different universities being skewed more in their favor and disproportionate treatment as far as the funds go. So this was better. I wouldn't say that it addresses that completely, but U of H is very happy about this, and as well as the other standard state universities. So there was no opposition to that one. That's Prop 5.
Is this the case where U of H wants to be like Harvard? Is that what it is? They want to have this level that they're not never going to achieve because they're not good enough?
It is about enhancing the research ability and the quality of professors and expansion of medical, IT, technology. They want to, yeah, it enhances all of that. Now, whether they get to an Ivy League level, that's a different thing. That's Prop 5. There was no opposition to that. Prop 6 is creating a Texas water fund for water state projects. There's no opposition to that.
What is that exactly?
It creates a Texas water fund for water. So basically, when it says it creates a fund, it means that they're setting aside a bunch of money at the comptroller's office that generally states different parts, agencies within the state can apply for water projects, whatever that falls under that umbrella. And they approve the grants, they distribute the money. Let me see if it says anything very specific. No, the language is it's a one-sentence proposition. But if you read the pros and cons, I should say, you'll get a better idea of what that's about. It's going to take me a long time to read it. And I didn't memorize it. That's Prop 6, the Texas Water Fund. Prop 7 creates a Texas Energy Fund. We've got ERCOT, we've got the issues with ERCOT, we've got the privatization issues, which means that scarcity is better for private business because demand helps, prices go up. And that's really a tension that just exists, and what the Texas Legislature did to address that this session after Uri and the price spikes, to try to avoid that in the future, was to say we're going to generate more energy, bring more energy to the grid, and we're going to incentivize that. And if you can bring more energy to the grid, we're going to give you incentives, monetary incentives. And that's partially what this is related to. This is $5 billion to create an energy fund. The problem that we had, Democrats mostly had, this session with the tax incentives to the grid that related to the grid and making the grid more reliable and stronger and avoiding consumer price hikes, was that they very intentionally cut out solar and wind. And Texas has been pretty good with solar and wind. In fact, I was hearing a report, and I think all of you know this, that during the day when the grid is bursting at its seams, needing more energy, solar is what's been saving us. And they have a dispatch rule that they opt for the least expensive energy first as much as they can, and then the costly energy later. So that means energy like wind and solar. So we were and clean. So we were really disappointed that the Republicans very intentionally cut out wind and solar. We fought for it, we tried to do amendments, even some of the Republicans were for it, but it passed overwhelmingly.
What would be the incentive? Why did they do that? I mean,
Oil.
Get money from oil and gas.
industry.
Tammy, yes or no on this amendment? What would you
This-
recommend?
Well,
Yes, amen to that.
it's a tricky question because, as I said, there's an inherent conflict between consumers and energy providers because it's a business model. And the more demand and less supply there is, the higher the prices can go, right? There's not like a natural incentive that we're just gonna have all this energy available so that everybody's covered and we have no problem. So there's like an inherent conflict. And so the legislature, the way they fix it is they say we're going to incentivize those energy producers to bring more energy to our grid. If it was a state agency or a state energy system, we wouldn't have that inherent sort of business profit interest, driven. Would you say that? Ben's really good at verbalizing this kind of stuff, but I think I'm trying to simplify it so that we don't get too much in the weeds, but so is this a good prop? Well, you throw money at that to get more energy, but you're also fueling that design.
Market architecture. Giving money to the very people that cause the problem.
Yes.
How do you solve a problem by giving money to the people that cause the problem?
Yes.
Exactly.
Elect Democrats, that's what you gotta do.
Since that's really what it comes down to, because since 1999, when they redesigned the market, basically the philosophy of it is that the people with the most profit, their profits have to be secured first before anything happens. Now, we had another type of legislation with a different set of priorities where maybe we had, instead of Speaker Phelan, we had Speaker Shaw. The whole thing would be a different story, because we could go to what other states have, which is a capacity market. Which is basically ensure that there's capacity to meet demand, regardless of what it costs to the producers, right? Because it's oriented towards the benefit of consumers. And so you have one group of people who believe that they need to kowtow to that group, and then you have Penny Shaw, and the others who believe that consumers need to come first.
So there you go.
So in a nutshell, not a good bill.
Yes, that's true.
Okay.
That's true. They do take the excess energy from solar. So there was opposition to that one. That's Prop 7 as well as Prop 8, which is a broadband fund for 10 years. And that's a lot less. It's 1.5 billion, but it's to bring, make sure that everybody has access to broadband, which on its surface sounds good. There's opposition to it, and it's listed here. One of the things is money has been thrown at broadband forever, it seems like. I remember under Obama that they were going to solve the broadband infrastructure and access, because it's kind of a two-part problem, right? You can build all the infrastructure, but then if people don't have grants or incentives to be able to still afford it, then that's the second part of it. And we're still working on that. We passed a huge bill last session to fund it and to create an office to study it, the broadband office, a statewide office. And then this is putting money in it to make it happen. So you'll read the opposition and the pros and cons and see what you think about it. It's another one of those issues like the grid, and you might want to call Bill. And so Prop 9 is Prop 9 is a no oppo bill. What was that?
I have a question about the broadband.
Yes.
And knowing that it's been long term, it's ebb and flow of actually happening. I thought part of the infrastructure provided through Biden, that it should be taking care of some of that.
It will.
So is that part of it, or is there more?
They want more.
Yes,
I had a feeling, but.
Yes, it's more. The Biden administration, they have provided a lot of money for a lot of different infrastructure, thermal energy, broadband, all kinds of things. But yes, this is saying we want more money. We want to hand out money for broadband and make sure that it gets done.
So why is this not a handout to Comcast, Xfinity, AT&T, and whatever the providers are, any place else? Huh?
Business, it's not you. It's not personal, it's business. Business never gets a handout.
I didn't even
What
understand.
I said, it's a handout to Comcast and Xfinity and everybody.
Everything in this legislature will be a handout,
Where they're
or,
going to need to buy a service. It's not just about infrastructure.
Well, I'm glad you said that. And
Anybody else
not
here? Cable bill up around $300 a month. Anybody?
Come on.
Somehow we're going to provide infrastructure so they can build
Don't do it.
Oh, yeah, she's gonna call him.
I have no problem with it.
Yes, and I hear you. And this is how the government is solving the problems. The Republican-led government, this is their solution, is to,
Congress is a Republican-led government.
no, and I'm only talking about the state.
From the infrastructure bill, bullshit.
I didn't realize that.
It's up to every state gets it administrative. And how it's administrated in Texas is that the largest business and profit generators being the state, they get to have their hands in the jar first. But the end result should be, what we're hoping, is that kids in rural and underserved areas will get what they need, which is what we really want.
We give them
Even though-
$300 a month bill.
Yeah, but some people don't have any, they don't even have the opportunity to get that, that's the thing, it's not ideal, it's not ideal, but it's just what's available right now, until we follow Chuck's advice and get those dots changed. That's what it really comes
Remind
down
yourself,
to.
who built the internet? Who built the internet?
University.
We did. Taxpayers did. We have every reason that at the national level, we should be able to regulate the internet. We should be able to make it a public utility.
If we win an election, put money in pocket. Right now, in this
Doing the opposite isn't helping. We're not promoting that. We're not saying this is what we should be doing. This is what we should be hearing from our national leaders.
Well, when we hear from our national leaders, we should do that, but we're hearing from our state leaders.
In the context that we're in right now, we know the context, right? We know that it's this government, it's this makeup, and this is how they're proposing to solve the problem that you recognize is really a different problem. So I hear you, and I'm presenting the propositions, and you can make a decision if you think like Bill and say, this isn't a solution, this is perpetuating the problem, and we're throwing more money at a design that doesn't work. Who knows, maybe under a Democrat-led leadership, it might be a different problem, right? And that's what Bill's saying. Bill's saying that the federal government solution isn't the solution either, because we're just throwing money at the current design, and that's a deeper, more entrenched problem. So, I mean, I think like that when I decide on voting for propositions. I think about it deeper, and that's why it's good to read the pros and cons and say, is this something that should just be left to the legislative body that can be addressed every session and we can see where we're at instead of making it a more permanent solution in the Constitution? And that's why I gave the preface about that some of these things can be addressed, and when you read through the document that I printed for you, you'll see a lot of them say, this is an item better left, this is a policy item, better left for the legislature and not made into a permanent kind of solution. So that's why I said that at the beginning, keep that in mind. Proposition 9, one that you're going to hear a lot about, there's going to be a lot of advocacy about it, and that's the COLA, the cost of living adjustment for the retired teachers. That is something that the Democrats have been fighting for many sessions. We just file bills and file bills and file bills. And so we finally, with this $32 billion or more actually surplus, it was hard to overlook the teachers, the retired teachers, it really was. So we finally put that on the ballot, and there's no opposition to that. And the teachers will be pushing for that very hard. Yes?
I'm a retired teacher, and I just want to say, I don't depend on my teacher retirement exclusively, but we have many teachers who depend on their teacher retirement. They've not gotten a raise in a long time. In Texas, if you get teacher retirement, you cannot get Social Security.
That's right.
You cannot file on your spouse's Social Security. I myself worked 11 years Social Security job before I became a teacher, okay? They have docked my Social Security by 50% because I have a pension. Do they tell that to somebody who has a Texaco pension or an Exxon pension? So please, if people say these amendments are not important, they are, but yes, are not.
This one is huge, yes, and there's no opposition, and we really do need to give this to the retired teachers. This is a really clear one. And there were, and there was a stipend benefit too that's either going out or has gone out for teachers. So I think all the retired teachers know about that. And there's a formula for if you've reached a certain age by September 1st, you get a certain amount. If there happens to be a husband and wife retired teacher in the same household, it's doubled. So luckily they don't say, well, there's only one of you that can get it. So some people are getting a double benefit. So that would be, in some cases, $15,000. It is a one-time benefit, but then the COLA is over and above that, the one that we're talking about that's on the ballot.
Hey, Penny, if you could get me that $15,000, I'll love it, because I'm gonna get right about 800.
Oh, gosh. Do you have a spouse that was a teacher too? Do you have a spouse that was a teacher? That's usually what it takes. So one of the representatives at the Texas House, Dr. Allen, is a retired teacher before she became a legislator, and her husband was a retired teacher too. So they will get both of those, and that's basically how it works. So that's Prop 9. That's a definite yes. That's an easy one. And I would say the PUF fund for the universities is a yes too, if you want mine. And then the very first one that I mentioned too. So there were, what was the other one? The house taxes. Those are three that it's hard to say no to those. Prop 10, let's see what this is. This is about medical equipment and having a tax exemption. It's supposedly to increase the medical equipment chain supply. That's what the intent is behind that. We can't do Medicaid expansion, we can't help people get insured, but I guess we can give people a tax incentive for medical equipment. That's the best we can do. That one had opposition, so please take a close look at that.
More about that?
Yeah, let's know more about that.
Okay.
About the Medicaid and why we're not getting that.
Oh, yes, yeah, we're gonna, at the end of this, we're gonna get to talk a little bit more about that. Yeah, so was I when I got elected. I was like, why do we keep doing this? So I will tell you, I'll tell you the answer that they gave me, and then I'll tell you what my experience has been since I've been there. Okay, so Proposition and 11 or 12 are not really about our area, but they are constitutional amendments. 11 is about El Paso and being able to assess more taxes for land acquisition for parks, to be able to build more parks. So I don't think it's a bad one, but there is some opposition. There's pros and cons to that one. And then there's Prop 12, which is affecting Galveston, and that's an interesting one. It wants to abolish, they want you to vote to abolish the county treasurer in Galveston and to be able to contract a private service. So basically privatizing the treasury in Galveston County, right? Which could start a domino effect, it could start a trend, and that's probably one of the oppositions. That one had a lot of opposition.
Which one was that?
Yes.
Did any Republican oppose that one?
It only says the statements, it doesn't say who supported or denied it.
Okay.
Proposition 13, do you mean on the House floor? I don't have the record, but if anyone wanted to look up the record,
Yeah, we can let
HJR 134, that it's based on HJR 134, and you can see if there were, because obviously you're asking the question because there are Republican representation mostly in that area. So it'd be interesting to know if they themselves wanted that, right? Because some of them may have voted against it. So that's Prop 12 and 11 El Paso and Galveston. Prop 13, let's see, that one asks you to vote to raise the mandatory retirement age for judges from 75 to 79. And believe it or not, it had no opposition, but I mean, that's, think about that. Raising it from 75 to 79 for mandatory retirement age. And that didn't have any opposition.
What if we can have a president that's gonna be older than that? I mean,
Yeah, but these are different pension systems.
yeah.
Different pensions. Okay, so that's Prop 13 about the judges and the mandatory retirement age. Prop 14, which I think is the last one, is a state parks conservation fund. So basically putting a lot of money in the comptroller's office under a special banner for state park conservation. So if you're good with that, it had no opposition. That might be one that's not too bad. And that's it. Those are the 14 constitutional amendments. You've got a handout. You've got a copy of the Texas Constitution, so have fun doing your homework. We have a retired teacher if you need any tutoring. She's right over there. But you're going to have to pay her, okay? Okay, so that's it for that, and then we